Maloalele, Nisambula, and good morning. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister, nobles of the realm, members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, government officials, members of civil society and the media, and members of the public. Thank you very much for having me as a representative of the UNDP here, and on behalf of the Commonwealth Pacific Governance Facility, thank you from both of us for having us here to be part of something that's so important. As we look around the room, it's really encouraging to see how many of you have braved a possible cyclone to be a part of what perhaps is a new storm of change in terms of your democratic rights and engagement. In fact, it's really exciting for us to be here because what you're doing here with this work on freedom of information is honestly groundbreaking in our region. Some of you will know me because I've been to Tonga a number of times, and in fact the first time I came here was in 2007, so before your constitutional reforms, when your members of parliament were then having a meeting on freedom of information as part of democracy. And it's so encouraging to see where you've moved to 5 years later. In our region, we only have one country which has actually passed freedom of information legislation, and that's Cook Islands. But as I look here, I see that there's a real consultative process going on, and that's what's so important about this. And I'm really excited to go to the rest of the region and tell them what you're doing here. That you can already see before this policy is even passed, that there's a partnership between the government and the people in terms of trying to recognise information as something that connects a people to its own government. And that is exciting. I just wanted to very briefly talk about two elements of the right to information. As your Deputy Prime Minister has identified, this is a very important part of Tonga's transition in its own democratic development. I actually worked on the right to information before I came to the Pacific region. It's something I've worked on for a decade. And I can say to you, you really, as I said, are leading in terms of reflecting on what a democracy means to a country when your government recognises so clearly that information is empowering to the public. I went to South Africa and talked to them about their law. When they moved from an apartheid regime to democracy, one of the first laws they passed was their FOI law. In Mexico, when they moved from a dictatorship to a democracy, their transparency law was the first law they passed. Last year, I went to the Arab states. Yesterday was the anniversary of the downfall in Egypt of Hosni Mubarak. When I talked to them, I was actually talking to them last year about FOI and about how it's a way for them to actually get their citizens engaged again with their democracy. As you would know, in the Pacific, there are a lot of people in our villages who don't understand what's happening in our capitals. They don't necessarily feel connected to the government and the services that are there for their benefit. It's been my experience working on FOI that this is actually what it's about. It's a really practical way of facilitating participation. As a development partner, we talk about participation, but even today I know I'm doing it, we're having a consultation. I come to you on my time, I bring you out in a cyclone so you can have this conversation. The right to information is actually about you deciding when you want to ask someone a question, what you want to ask the question about, and being able to get an answer. That's democratic participation. That's democratic engagement. That ordinary members of the public can actually start having a conversation with their officials about things that are important to them. And it's really encouraging that from almost day one, your government recognised this as a really fundamental component of their democratic transition. The second point I wanted to make is simply this issue about the right to information being about development. As you'll hear from my accent, I'm actually a citizen of Australia. And I know I'm also a lawyer. When we learned about freedom of information, it was seen as administrative. It was a little bit about how you just find out about government. The media used it a bit, politicians used it a lot, but it wasn't really seen as a development right. I then 5 years ago worked in India and I was involved in their right to information campaign, and they have a completely different view of the right to information. This was about development for them. It was literally about people in the villages being able to say, our health clinic seems to be run down, what's happening? Are you putting any money into it? Our schools don't have a teacher, what's happening? Where's the money going? You said that you were building us a canal, but we haven't seen it get finished, why is that? And it actually allowed them to participate in their own development. As a development partner for UNDP, this is why we see the benefit of freedom of information. It's not necessarily about nuku'alofa and high-level politics. It's about ordinary people getting involved in their own development and finding out about what these services are, really trying to make that connection. And as I say, it's why it's so encouraging to see such a wide cross-section of the Tongan community here today to start having that conversation. It's so encouraging to hear your Deputy Prime Minister say, please take this paper out and start talking about it. You're almost kind of our first line of attack on this, but it really will be important to get a conversation going in your communities about this. An FOI law will have no impact if the people don't actually use it. It's not the kind of legislation that can just sit on the books and still have an impact. It has to actually be used so that people start asking questions, start engaging, start coming to you as government officials even, and saying, can I please find out about this? And have you say, yes, actually you can. Because I have to say, in my experience, this is one of the other benefits of a policy like this. As a country like Tonga moves towards a more open democracy, the fact is, I've also been a public servant. I know what it's like to work in government and have someone ask you a question. If you're not sure if you can say yes, you say no. It's what we as public servants are trained to do. We have to protect the government. An FOI policy is also useful because it provides guidance to public servants about what your government wants you to do in terms of letting information out into the public. So there really are these two elements to it, that it will provide guidance to the public service that the government is committed to openness, and it will provide guidance to the public that you can actually ask these questions. So today, when you engage with these various elements and discussions on specific parts of the discussion paper, please keep that in mind. As officials, do you feel you're getting enough guidance? As members of the public, do you feel that this will let you ask the questions you would like to ask? Do you think that the processes will be easy enough to use, not only for you, but for your cousins and your relatives in the villages who still might want to know about what the government's doing in nuku'alofa? We really do hope this will be practical. I'm sorry I speak in English, but please, during the day, if you want to speak in Tongan, we can get translations. It's very much your consultation, it's your paper, it's your process. And UNDP certainly stands here in support of your government to try and have an open, engaged conversation that can make this better. This is very much part of a process. As the Deputy Prime Minister said, hopefully you will get FOI legislation which will enshrine this as a right, a legal right for every Tongan. That is what you're looking at in the long term. This is the first step on a really important process, and it's really great to have you here with us to take this first step. In that context, then again, thank you very much for letting UNDP be a part of this, for letting the Commonwealth Pacific Governance Facility be a part of this. We're really pleased to be here, and we're very much looking forward to the discussions. Maloa pito.